Hello. So it's nice and everything that anime has become a little bit more popular and has less of that creepy guy who wears fedoras, living in his mother's basement type of stigma attached to it. But what gets thrown to the wayside, even now, is the medium that birthed these visual masterpieces in the first place. I tend to go in phases when watching anime, like most of my interests, but I will religiously keep up with my favorite ongoing manga series. For the sake of this video, I'm only going to be focused on my favorite manga that are currently being published and are still in serialization. But if you'd like a video about my all-time favorite manga, completed and otherwise, give this video a like and I'll do it. Because why not? I usually recommend audiobooks to those who aren't big into reading, but honestly, visual novels and comics are a great alternative. I just happen to have a soft spot for manga. All the titles that I'm going to mention and talk about do have an anime adaptation, and not all of them are terrible. I would say they're also considered pretty mainstream. I wouldn't call any of these off the beaten path or obscure by any means. Most of these are pretty widely known, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Alright, sweet. Now that the disclaimers are all out of the way, let's get started. The first one I'm going to recommend is Akatsuki no Yona. English name, Yona of the Dawn. What's pretty unique about this series is that it does have a Japanese artist, but there are a ton of Korean and Chinese influences mixed in. Most of the character names are Korean, and a lot of the characters' wardrobes and the clothes that they wear have a heavy Korean influence, which I think is great. It centers around young Princess Yona, who's betrayed by her childhood crush after he plans a coup d'etat, which ends up killing her father, the king. She is then banished from the castle and forced into exile with her other childhood friend and personal guard, Hawk. Thus begins a long and arduous journey that leads them to trying to unite the powers of the 4 dragon descendants that are said to have been the basis of their country's founding. They need the power of these 4 dragons to try and help and save their kingdom from ruin and despair. As is pretty typical with most harem animes, Yona, of course, is this beautiful young girl, and she just finds herself being surrounded by a bunch of beautiful young men, but you won't hear me complaining. The art is beautiful, the storyline is beautiful, the series is chocked full of political espionage, romance, betrayal, magical fantasy, prophecy fulfillment, and the character development, just a sweet, angsty chef's kiss. So yeah, definitely one that is worth checking out. The second title that I'm going to recommend to you, Gangsta by Kosuke. This one's a little bit more nitty-gritty, don't do well with blood and gore and disembowelment. Don't say I didn't warn you. So Nick and Warwick, childhood friends, they label themselves as the handymen who take on jobs that, well, no reputable person would do. Really, they just pick up the slack where the police fall short and do jobs for the ruling mafia families who don't want to get their hands dirtied. So Nick is what in their world is called a Twilight, or someone who has superhuman abilities. Also, I love that Nick is deaf and communicates with sign language. Diversity and inclusivity. So on a particular job that has Nick and Warwick trying to eliminate this local gang that the mafia just finds kind of problematic and troublesome, they end up inadvertently saving this girl, Alex. Warwick is the one that takes pity on her. I also think he kind of, fancies her a little bit because she is really gorgeous. He decides to spare her life, take her in, and she then kind of acts as like their secretary. Except the plot completely unravels as some of the major mafia families start butting heads when it comes to what to do with the growing Twilight population. Some of them want to help and protect the Twilight population, while the others want to completely eliminate them altogether. And as you can probably guess, all hell breaks loose. As of today, there are 8 volumes consisting of about 56 chapters. Kosuke, the artist, she actually suffers from lupus, so the series does frequently go on hiatus for her health. It's currently on hiatus right now, but I read on Twitter that she might be coming out of hiatus in the next month or so. So definitely go support her. It'll definitely have you on the edge of your seat the entire time you're reading it. The series is full of such powerful, bomb-ass female characters. Whew. I mean, the head of one of the most powerful mafia families in the city is run by a literal 15-year-old girl. So if you're all for a series that is just full of female empowerment, definitely check this out. Number 3 on the recommended list, Kurosatsuji, or in a language that I won't completely butcher, Black Butler. Yes, that's right. I'm not entirely sure what made me start reading this series, as I was not a huge fan of the anime adaptation, but something just drew me in, and I'm really glad it did, because this series is just full of moments that'll just make you scream, what the fuck? So our main protagonist, Seal Phantom Hive, he is the last remaining member of the Phantom Hive family. He also happens to be like 11, 12. His parents are believed to have perished in the fire that totally destroyed his family's mansion. And it was during this fire that he is kidnapped by this local cult, along with a bunch of other children who are going to be used as human sacrifice to try and summon some kind of demon. I know, we're already off to a really chip-cherry start. So he is used as human sacrifice to summon this demon. Not only does he survive, but he also manages to make a contract with the demon that was summoned with his body. How lucky. The deal that he makes with the demon is to get revenge on whoever it is who killed his family. And in exchange for helping him, the demon then gets to eat his soul after everything's said and done. I don't know, I guess that's as an equal of an exchange as one could get when dealing with a demon. So to remain inconspicuous while he helps Seal enact his revenge, he takes the human form of what we know as Sebastian and takes on the role of Seal's butler as his cover. This shit gets dark. And I mean, you left your cookies an hour too long in the oven, burnt to a crisp, dark, and morbid. A little gross. Which usually isn't my bag, but the story is mildly addicting. And no, the atrociousness that was the second anime season has nothing to do with the manga series, thank God. Number 4 on my recommendation list, Noragami by Adachi Toka. My Japanese pronunciation is trash. As so many manga and anime stories start out, Hiyori happens to be your typical high school girl, whose life gets intertwined with that of gods and demons after she is involved in a bus accident while trying to save a complete stranger. Now, this stranger that she saves happens to be Yato, or a nameless god, who spends the majority of his time trying to gain human followers so that he can become a more prominent god in Japanese religion. So she survives the accident, but as a result, her soul will periodically just detach from her body, which causes her to join what they refer to as the Far Side, parallel universe where demons and lost human souls wander. So she ends up befriending Yato and agreeing to help him gain human followers in exchange for him trying to figure out a way to permanently reattach her soul to her body so that she doesn't constantly slip out into the netherworld. This manga is great. It has a gritty plotline, but it also has an amazing sense of humor. I'm also a sucker for storylines that involve countries' mythology, which this does. This heavily incorporates Japanese religion and mythology, and it manages to give whole new, brilliant personalities to all of these well-known Japanese gods. Okie dokie, number 5 on the recommendation list, Owari no Seraph or Seraph of the End. As overdone as vampires are, this series really does have a new take on things. So something triggers the end of the world right off the bat, causing all humans over a certain age to just up and die, leaving all children alone and helpless. That's where the vampires come in. They round up as many children as they can, and they herd them into this secret underground city where they essentially treat them as livestock and raise them for their blood. Our two protagonists, Yu and Mika, they both were brought to the underground city along with a bunch of other kids in their orphanage. They're orphans. Of course they're orphans. After years of captivity, Mika finally manages to obtain a map of this underground city and is able to locate the only exit back into the human world. So he convinces Yu and the rest of the orphan children that they need to try and find this exit and they need to escape the vampires. So that's what they do, which is where everything really goes to shit. Turns out they walk straight into a vampire ambush, and the only one who manages to escape alive is Yu. Not you, but Yu. So he manages to escape and rejoin the land of the living and is conveniently found almost immediately by a general of the Japanese Imperial Demon Army, which is a military group charged with fighting off the vampires and these other demonic creatures that came about after the end of the world happened. Which, as you later find out, didn't actually kill like every grown adult. Some people managed to survive, so he takes Yu in. Not you, but Yu. He then grows up with the goal of wanting to join the Japanese Imperial Demon Army, wanting to exact revenge on all vampires who killed his family, as one does after having everyone he's ever known and loved just brutally murdered by them. But after he does become a member of the Japanese Imperial Demon Army, take a shot every time I say that, he is confronted with a horrible truth at a very pinnacle turning point in the plotline. I'm sure I'm gonna get hate for this, but Yu is not my favorite character. I actually find him really annoying. Gurren, the general who takes Yu in, far more interesting and way more emotionally complex. But I digress. Recommendation numero 6. Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-kun, or Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun. Almost quite a literal translation. One word: hilarious. An overly cheerful high school girl, Chio, finally makes the decision to confess to her crush, Nozaki. And of course, in the realm of classic misunderstandings, he mistakes her confession for that of admiration towards him as an artist behind a very popular shoujo manga series, which he does secretly on the side under a female pen name. He gives her many a kudo for figuring out his secret identity and gives her an autograph. And all of this just leaves her very confused and a little heartbroken. This is one of those slice of life manga series that is always feel good. I mean, there's no sad dramatics. It's dramatic in the sense of colossal misunderstandings, misconstrued intentions and feelings, mistaken identities, that sort of thing. Every single character is incredibly likable. You find yourself rooting for them in all of the dumb scenarios that they find themselves in. 10/10 would recommend. Alright, last but certainly not least, number 7 on this recommendation list. Monogatari. So this is actually based off of the very popular original light novel series of the same name, which I would recommend reading. The Monogatari series remains to be one of my all-time favorite anime series. Shaft Studios employs god-level animators. Just pure perfection. So when it was announced that it was going to get a manga adaptation, of course I was all in. So Monogatari is the first 2 volumes of the light novel series, which introduces us to our main protagonist, Koyomi Araragi-kun, a high school boy who suffers a terribly unfortunate run-in with a vampire over Golden Week vacation, leaving him half vampire, half human. Because of his pseudo-supernaturalness, he happens to attract several members of the opposite sex who are affected by some type of supernatural oddity, most notably Hitagi, who appoints herself as his girlfriend after he successfully helps her. I mean, that's one way to get a girl. So this series also incorporates a lot of Japanese mythology. A lot of the oddities that these girls find themselves afflicted with tend to be tied into Japanese folklore. In Tagi's case, she has a run-in with this giant crab, which has something to do with Japanese folklore. And so she's then possessed by the spirit of the crab, which makes her weightless. Which, again, I'm not really sure why that is like such a huge problem. It's not like she just starts to just like up and float away. But as he encounters more females who need freeing from some supernatural weirdness, each of them has an item or an article of clothing that symbolizes what kind of creature they're being possessed by. This series is weird. It's hilarious. It's weird. There's a reason why it's my favorite. So, check it out. Well, there you have it. 7 great manga recommendations that are currently still being published. As was the case with my book recommendation video, leave a comment down below if you've read any of the series that I talked about. Comment any of the ones that you haven't read but kind of want to. Or comment down below your own personal manga recommendations. The more recommendations, the better. And again, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, especially if you'd like me to create a video talking about my all-time favorite manga series. A wish is my command. As always, I hope that you guys are staying safe and healthy. Continue to wear a mask when you go outside. And with all that being said, I'll see you in the next one.